And good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ATAR Cloud and Coffee discussion on all things modernization and transformation. My name is Chris Oglesby with MorphWorks, and absent again today is my dynamic co-host, Bill Hunt. For those of you that weren't able to join our last one, Bill's taken on a new role recently with the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, and waiting for his clearance. Before the introduction, I'd like to explain that this platform is hosted under the ATAR Cloud and Infrastructure pillar with the goal of bringing lessons learned and ideas to the ATAR community. Our focus will be a conversation about our guests' experiences, past and present, executing modernization and transformation efforts. Again, as Kirsten mentioned, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of the chat window. Please feel free to enter in questions, and we'll work through the questions into our discussion. So now let's move to introductions. Today's guest is Robyn Rees with the Department of Interior and has taken her IT management background to workforce transformation. Robyn, would you mind sharing a little bit about your background?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me here, Chris. I will give Bill a mulligan for not being and we'll just make up for his missing personality through really wonderful conversation. Like Chris said, my name is Robyn Rees. I work at the Department of the Interior in the Office of Human Capital, and I'm a purpose-driven worker, meaning I take my strengths and I put them where I want to influence most. And in this case, I want to influence what I call an ever-ready workforce. And I think we can do that by bringing advanced technology, including all the capabilities that cloud offers, to the space of workforce and work and learning and development data so that we can enable an ecosystem to always have us ready to meet the missions. And so while I'm in the Office of Human Capital, my background is information technology management. I started in the private sector for a small business, working contracts for DoD. And then I moved into CPIC functions at the National Science Foundation, where I then did IT governance and strategy and met some really great IT leaders in the space. And then I jumped over to DOI just a few years ago to start bringing transparency to jobs data. So I appreciate you having me here.
No, this is great. And so I'm going to hit you with one of the first questions, and it's one that I think you and I share. Just the aspect of it, whether or not the terminology fits with with the new cultures that are out there. But one of the things that you talked about in kind of transformation and learning, and I think again we had a long conversation about this, is kind of the term around fail fast, fail cheap, and would love to kind of dive into how that kind of builds on, what we should be thinking about, what organizations should be doing around kind of the transformation and workforce productivity.
Yeah, fail fast and fail cheap. So my memory first comes to this. I was at GSA when the director of GSA coined the phrase fail fast, fail forward. And that was difficult. I was a contractor at the time, and contractors don't fail. We deliver. That's how we make our money. And we don't deliver something partly done. We deliver the perfect product. And that's in part because we're expected to, right? But also because we attract people to those roles who are achievers and who want to get A's on everything, right? And so we deliver perfect products. And so that was a little difficult, I would say, a fail fast, fail forward, because the word fail is in there. And I think, Chris, you said that you've heard this from some of the people, and especially in the younger generations that worry for you. None of us want to fail, right? But I think that when you start changing that lexicon a little bit and you say fail fast, fail cheap, what you're saying is learn something. Try something and learn something, but do it small so that you don't make a huge mistake, right? Make little mistakes. And again, there's the word mistakes. So what I've started doing recently is my son was trying out for a travel baseball team, and he was really excited about it. But then the morning before he left, he said, "Mom, what if I fail?" And I said, "Well, I don't think you can fail, but I think you can learn something about yourself when you're there. And then let's see what happens afterwards." And so I am shying away from using the word fail because failure is heavy, right? But I think that what we're getting to in the culture of our work And what in the federal government, at least, is easier for us to accept is this ability to try things at a smaller scale, learn from them, and then keep moving. And the technologies that we have today are so new and rapidly evolving that we kind of have to, right? Almost everything we do is R&D when we talk about technology now.
Yeah, it's interesting using kids sports as an analogy, having coached a lot. We would have for kids that I coached, I would have sessions of go out and show me what you can do, right? Rather than what in the hockey vernacular that I've used, it's a culture of cone skating, which is, okay, I need you to skate to that cone, turn left, skate to that cone, turn right, skate to that cone, and then do it backwards, right? And so your kind of mentality is to head that way. So learning is definitely one thing, but one of the comments made to me, and I think one of the things that I like to use is giving people creative latitude. So is that something that you use, especially as we look at kind of the IT world and especially the development world?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that in my experience, because I've watched this from the IT management perspective, I've also participated in it as an innovator myself, where we don't really know the answers. And this is different than the way we used to build and operate and manage IT systems, right? And the environment we work in is also different. So when we used to execute these projects, we knew the outcomes, we knew the 10 steps to get there, we knew how much it was going to cost to get there, and we were driving that schedule, right? And if we wanted to change an element of it, then all the other things flexed around that one element. And so there you have your traditional project management. And then we get into the space where we're trying to do things more creatively, trying to stimulate that creativity, but also trying to just add speed to what we're doing. And that requires us to do things in smaller bits. Enter Agile, right? And smaller bits, in some ways works, in some ways have unintended consequences, which we could talk about later. But you have to give up some element of certainty when you're working in those smaller bits, because you don't really know every step that's going to take to get there, but you know what outcome you're driving towards. And I think that, in my experience, was difficult for the doers, the achievers, to get to that space where they're working in smaller increments, maybe with not as much definition as they liked to have going into the whole thing. But it was also equally or more difficult for the leaders, the investors, the people who gave their money to do those projects to not really have that much certainty. And so there's absolutely a need for leadership to make a safe space for creativity and innovative thinking and for learning, and learning cheap.
Right.
And it's easier as leaders to endorse that kind of rapid learning, rapid prototyping, when you know the dollar amount is a decimal point, not a big dollar.
Yeah, but I also think that the smaller increments, the smaller achievements, the smaller wins can be celebrated, right? That okay, hey, look at this, right? But at the same time, I'd be kind of curious, especially from your old CPIC and IT governance, because that's some of what we do is kind of that the transformation, the move to something different, right? You've got that change aspect, which we'll definitely get to, because we get to it on every show, as you're familiar with. But the keeping that strategy and that focus in check as you do have that, right? Because I agree. I think everybody just wants to go, to use my old Marine friend analogy, take the hill, so to speak. But how do you kind of balance that, right? You gotta keep that, keep those balanced, and celebrating the win, but still need to keep going.
Yeah, this is a great conversation. A mentor back when I was on the industry side, who would remind us, is that the hill you want to die on? Right? So be strategic, right? We couldn't just pick a hill to fight for. We had to be strategic. Otherwise, that could be the one we die on. And that really resonated with me as a daughter of a former Navy SEAL. I was like, no, actually, I don't. So let's talk about this a little bit more. But I think that one of the things that I've been reflecting on quite a lot is, as leaders, we have to be careful about how we say go, right? Because we want to get people to action and we want to get them moving, because everybody needs to do their piece in order to get to this larger outcome. But in order to do that in a way that really nets the benefit intended, we have to know where we're going. So we have to clearly articulate that vision and let people find their puzzle piece in filling in the whole picture, so that when the puzzle's done, it creates something, right?
Right.
I think that when I think about cloud, right, I remember I was industry when cloud first started becoming a thing. And I remember saying to my program manager, who was my mentor at the time, like, isn't that just somebody else's data center? Like, it's not ethereal. It's not like it doesn't exist. There's something somewhere that exists, but it was kind of hard for me to wrap my brain around. And I'm here working in a data center in an infrastructure environment with systems integrators, and we're talking about the cloud, right? And and I think that when I look back over that portion of my career, and I'm a dot connector, by the way. I like to believe that things are intended to connect and that they're for a purpose. We just don't all know the full story yet. But when you look back over the maturation of where we've been in federal IT modernization, and we think about, when GSA first came out, or OMB first came out with the cloud first strategy over a decade ago, when we're telling our organizations, our IT organizations, cloud first, right, we're incentivizing them to go to the cloud. Now we have to do that smartly, which came later. But at that time, if you're hearing cloud first and you're investing in cloud first and you're not really sure what the vision, the outcome is, then you're going to cloud. And we all have heard stories about what happened with going to cloud, and it wasn't maybe the best thing to do. And so then as I reflect back on my time, there was cloud first, then there was the fiscal year 14 cut and reinvest strategy that was like, hey, we know things cost money, find a way to pay for it, right? In my opinion, that kind of cut and reinvest strategy stimulates that creativity. And then you do have to do things in smaller chunks and learn fast. But in my current work today, Chris, when I think about what I need to do in order to make sure we're effective, not just today, but in the future, I personally think we need to think data first. And so this is where, as leaders, when we say go, as when we create a policy or say do this thing, we can expect our people to do that thing, right? With zest, with zeal, right? But if what we want is for them to do this strategic coordinated thing, then we have to say, hey, by the way, what we really want to do is think data first, cloud smart, right? And so this is my new message to the world. There are a lot of reasons why, when we maybe as organizations went to the cloud in the first place, it wasn't as successful as we wanted. In many cases, that was because we weren't cloud ready.
Right.
We weren't cloud ready because we didn't have our data ready. We didn't have our data ready, and the spaghetti code around it was too hard to understand. So we couldn't just like go build fresh, sort of thing. So if you look over the history of these policies from 2011 Cloud First to 2017, the Open Government Data Act, or the Foundations for Evidence-Based Decision Act, to 2018 Cloud Smart, 2019 Federal Data Strategy, 2020, where are we? Right?
Right.
In 2021, I think we're in this data first approach to leveraging cloud so that we can continue to be dynamic as a workforce delivering against government missions. And so now there's a nice coordinated vision.
Well, so I think, and I guess take, to step back to give the shameless plug, since Bill's not here. Thank you for mentioning Cloud Smart for him. He always appreciates that. There's always thumbs up. So I'll since he's not here today, I'll give you that. But on the data side, it's one of the things that we talk about a lot, and I love the fact that you You've been focused on data both from a workforce standpoint as well as basically your IT, management background. We talk about it here as the understand, right? Learn and understand. One of the things I want to dig in on a little bit is some of the vernacular, right? Because we do have this evolution, right? We lose the, and again, being an old sales guy, we lose that vernacular that happens, right? So to your point about cloud, well, isn't that just somebody else's data center? I mean, I have experiences where we're in talking, seat management, but the person's brain was on utility-based computing, which was exactly the same thing. It just had changed. That was, and we spent 2 hours having the conversation, and because of the vernacular, couldn't tie the two. So as we look at, what happens with the data, the understanding, and the reskilling, how do you make sure that, that people have a good understanding before they do start kind of heading down a path? Because it changes a lot. First, smart, data understanding, where are we? Like those are all pieces that can confuse, I guess, people in organizations.
I would say this is a tough balance, Chris. The understanding part comes to communication, right? If we're transparent with where we think we're going and why this piece is the next thing we need to do in order to get there, then the hope is that the people executing against it sort of understand the logic backbone that exists, and so they can execute on that. And we're always tracking to make sure that we're moving towards the same place. The really difficult part of that for me in my experience is that I love talking about the vision, right? I mean, this is where I thrive. The vision, connecting the dots, what could be someday. And some people just, they get it, but it's not their thing. And so this ability to move from vision to value is something that I think we have to drive a balance to. So do I need everybody to understand every little thing? No. Do I need them to fully commit? No. Amazon, what is their tenant? It's disagree and commit, right?
Right.
It just understand. We just need to understand and move forward. So I think that striking the balance between being transparent with the vision and having people really understand it and buy into it, and then also just getting them to execute something that delivers value is where we have to strike this balance. And I like to say that, I'm certainly not the expert, right? I don't go build data centers, but I understand the language of information technology, and I understand the language of acquisitions and the language of finance and the language now of human capital. And so I like to say that I took the Rosetta Stone in those languages. And it's really important as leaders to be able to translate that vision into value through those different languages. And so I think that what that really gets to is just knowing your audience. And now the way that IT is moving and impacting the world of work and the way we carry out our work, it's not just an IT conversation. It's a business conversation. It's a human capital conversation. It's a finance conversation. And if you don't talk about it all together, then you're definitely leaving something behind. And then you won't fail fast, fail cheap. You'll fail big.
Right. So now let's dig into the data, because I think my understanding is you're starting to use the data to drive kind of the policy and meaning, right? Like you're really looking at how do we take that data, and I think you're using it in kind of the workforce area, right? So how do we take that data and actually use that to help people and organizations kind of continue to move forward, transform, and grow? I mean, we're as a company, we're very focused on what we call the 3 parts of you. It's very important to us on kind of those different aspects of those different elements of an individual. And you're using data to really kind of dig into that for the individual as well as the organization.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So the work that I'm doing is around what I like to refer to the ever-ready workforce, but I break it down in a simple equation: A plus B equals C. A in the equation contains all the data about me, my experiences, my skills, strengths, interests, things that I bring to the table from my non-federal work as well as federal work in today. The C side of the equation is a job, information about work today, in the future, generally when we look way out there. And then in the middle, it's all of the information and data that we need in order to connect the dots from A to C. So I've chosen a target and I want to get there. How do I close that gap? And that's where learning and development data comes in, and experiential learning, apprenticeships, things like that. And so what I'm working on and chipping away at with this R&D approach is, first, cloud is the answer for me to getting a data-enabled architecture that can be shareable across federal agencies so that we can answer complex questions with different data sets, accessing the pieces of the data sets that we need. So for example, if I, as the organization, think that in 10 years, I'm going to need a lot more people who can fly drones, right? I'd like to tell those people today that I'm going to need them to learn how to use drone technology, because my ability to meet the need or the demand for drone operators is much greater if I train people who already understand the mission and organization than if I expect them to pop up in the landscape 10 years from now and I just hire them brand new, right? Because then when I hire them brand new, there's a learning curve. Right. So this is simply a strategic way of making sure we continue to meet the missions, but we will not be able to rapidly assess our need and assess our workforce in the gap towards that need and get them on the path to meeting that need without having the data right? And if we don't have the data right, we can't take advantage of the cloud and artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities that can help us better analyze and understand that data and make decisions. And I'm not saying we're going to know the absolute endpoint, but we can look forward and say, in all of these possible scenarios, digital acumen, data literacy, a culture of teamwork and cross-functional capabilities is going to be absolutely needed. Let's train our workforce on that so that they can slot into these various places. So there's as much a technical and data element to enabling this kind of thing as there is a cultural element of just teaching our people to look toward the future. And I'd like to give an example that Dorothy Aronson, the CIO at NSF, would say to me often, and it was hard to swallow. She said, listen, you've got to get a B on today because we won't get an A tomorrow if we're trying to get the A+ today. And I was like, Dorothy, I'm an A+ student. I can't get a B, right? But in the end, the fact is that we cannot do it all perfectly. So we need leadership to say, here are the things that can get by while you focus on this, because we need to be able to get by tomorrow or we'll fail. Right?
So how do you use that data then to, like, so if you took the Robyn or the Chris from our past, right, and sit them down, how do you kind of help map that out? Do you use the data to help map that out for the individual as well?
So I think that we can get there. We're definitely not there today, but I think there's enough granularity in data, if we can architect our data to be understood at that level of granularity, that we could say, hey, I can help you figure out what kinds of things really give you energy. I'm really big on, if I'm doing work that sucks the energy out of me, I might be doing the wrong thing, right? But if I know what gives me energy, and then I look at the types of work that need to be performed where that really meets my best strengths, and I target those things, then I could be more strategic and deliberate about the work that I go after. And maybe that makes the younger Robyn get to that space a little bit more quickly than I did. Because when I hit on the work that really gave me the most energy, it was obvious. Like, it was so clear to me. And I think technology can help more of us get there. Fortunately, I had mentors and leaders and a variety of work experiences that helped me figure out what I really like to do. But not everybody has that opportunity. Right? They have the ability to maybe do those things, but maybe not the opportunity. There are only so many mentors in the world, right?
Right.
So how can we give more people access to that kind of opportunity to know themselves and to know something about work and to constantly be learning and growing by exposing that data in a smart, intelligent way? So that's really what I'm after. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And I think that kind of then goes into current environment, right? Because current environments, even as you said, not everybody has the opportunity, or many people don't even attempt, right? Because they may not have been, again, back to the cone skating, right? You haven't been taught, oh, go out here and get this mentor and try to learn from them, right? There's a lot of, well, let me just go in and do my job. And so I guess in today's world, or that was kind of brought upon us in the past year, I know as a small business, it was challenging for us, but creating that same opportunity of connectedness, right? That ability to do what you're saying of, okay, hey, here's things we need to do. And a lot of times you can kind of pick that up in a meeting, right? Somebody all of a sudden had energy on, we're going to migrate these systems to the cloud, and you see somebody's got passion, like, okay, how do we harness that technical passion? May not be somebody that wants to be a leader, may not somebody that wants to step up, but they could be our, kind of our technical tiger team, right? And so how do you in this world of virtual, all virtual, leverage that and manage that and be able to support people's interests and passion?
I love this question.
You would have thought we planned this, but this one,
I love this question.
I think we could talk for hours.
I recently, my husband said to me, do you remember when you used to hate teleworking? You used to telework. You had the option and you went to the office anyway. And life was different then. And that was just a few years ago. 2019 to be exact. And the difference was culturally how we included people and shared information. And when part of why I think I've been able to be as successful as I have been, relatively speaking for me, is because I made sure to be where the people were that were talking that could make decisions, so that as they were making decisions, I could influence to some degree, right? At least get my opinion in there, and then know that I was able to make whatever impact I was able to make. And so that required me to be in the building, in the meeting rooms, not like somewhere else down the hall, not attending the meeting, just sitting behind my desk, but I had to really put myself out there and learn a lot and always be prepared to say something, because that was the moment. And on the occasions when I did telework, because, I have 2 young kids, there are some times I just like, had to have a day to focus. The people in the building forgot I was teleworking, because teleworking meant you're not working or you're not accessible. And so that inclusion factor, I think, was really difficult for people. Now, fast forward, COVID happens, we have to work from home. Now we're all in the same space where we have to use technology that's not new, but
right.
We just haven't leveraged before. Oh my gosh, we don't need conference call numbers anymore. We can get on Zoom. That's amazing. So I personally don't feel like I lost anything in terms of collaboration and the ability to connect with humans, because we have technologies that allow us to see each other's facial expressions. What we had to get over was the cultural norm of turning our cameras off. And the way that I was able to get over that with my teams was by always keeping mine on. Whether or not they wanted theirs on, I was always showing up for them. And that was the respect that I paid to them. And so to make this long story a little bit short, as platforms like this, podcasts, presentations we get to give in communities practice in the federal government, things like that, as platforms like this allow us to share our message or to share conversations that spark other creativity and ignite fires around the place, those people then, those Tiger Team people come looking for you, right? And I was able to, through the Department of Interior's Open Opportunities platform, which is where we post our details and rotational assignments, I have 3 different detailees that are part-time from 3 different bureaus of the 10 bureaus under Department of the Interior, working with me on different aspects where their strengths contribute to the overall vision. But I can't do that all myself. And so when we're talking about our ability to leverage people's strengths, it's not so much tied to technology as it is culture. We just need to share that information and expect the creativity and input from people that aren't co-located with us.
Right. No, that's good. And I think everybody's been working through it. And I do agree technology's definitely a help. Quite honestly, I was shocked the other day. I had a meeting that was just a call-in number. I was looking for the click to, join a video conference, and it was just a conference line. I was actually kind of shocked after the time. And that it does bring the ability to, I think, in understanding in this world is the video fatigue, right? Because there is a level of trying to get things done and being engaged and working through that. There is the video fatigue, and so as individually, I think people, it does take a little extra effort as well, making sure that connectedness is there.
Yeah, I mean, video fatigue, meeting fatigue.
all the same, right?
Whether it's in person or it's enabled by technology platforms that bring us face to face, it is exhausting, right? But that's what we do. I guess it's just, finding that balance between being always on and creating space to be strategic and thoughtful, I think is a perennial problem that we had before the pandemic. And one that maybe has just been exacerbated because we are more able to be reached, right, because everybody's doing the same thing. But like all pendulums, like from cloud first to cloud smart, right? We will land, I think, in a good place because we're thinking about it and we're talking about it. So
yeah, and you also now have, it is, if you haven't done it in the past, it is a shift in having people in your home regularly, right? If you haven't worked from home, or you telecommuted a couple of days a week to working from home every day, it is different, right? You've got that people have to kind of go through that change in mentality on their own as well. And I think those are all pieces of kind of lessons learned through this as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely those elements of teamwork that are now coming to the culture of the workforce, because when we get back to that element of we're all achievers, individual contributors, and then you bring in the notion of the tiger team. Again, I was able to learn from some really amazing mentors in my time about creating that culture of teamwork that allows you to be transparent and problem solve things, not just in isolation. But the parable of the blind man and the elephant comes to mind. And this is a Dorothy Aronson thing. She's great at storytelling, but when you put that parable into the information technology space and you're trying to troubleshoot things, you're relying on people to share information about the piece that they know so that you can piece together the picture and figure out how to get it done. And when I think about how that applies to cloud, right? When we were operating our own data centers and IT infrastructures, and at that time I was also the contracting officer representative for infrastructure and help desk contracts, we knew what we had. Right? We knew the servers we had, how many virtual servers we had. The people that were responsible for those could sit around the table in the same room and talk about what might be going on and where the issue might be. And as we moved to cloud and we moved those responsibilities, layers of responsibilities out, we gave up some of the knowledge for troubleshooting. And so that again is a cultural shift, sort of a control shift that we had to make. But these are all things that are not distinctly cloud initiative. It just happens in real life, right? We have to share information. We have to know our information. We have to know our architecture in order to make good decisions. And so, I go back to that elephant and the blind man parable, because if you're not sharing the information, then you're not really getting the whole story and you think you know the answer. So as leaders, I think we have to have that space where we expect our teams to work as teams just like you do on the baseball field.
Right. So good segue into reskilling. I think we can spend a lot of time on this, but one of the things that that you've talked about is the need to move to a more dynamic approach, right? So, as we look at again all these changes, but just individually and collectively, reskilling and understanding the change in speed of technology, right? I think this is what we got into is technology is moving so fast. You can think about data centers, but the data center of yesteryear, so to speak, is a little bit even different today, right? Even the buildings and way they're managed are different than they were in the past, all the way through to development, blockchain, AI, and all of those pieces. And there is a need, I think, to kind of understand, but then also have the ability to dive deep. And I think we talked a little bit about this or touched on it, but the need to move to a more dynamic approach was your comment. So how are you encouraging folks to kind of adjust that reskilling play?
The first step to that, Chris, is that to me, it's not really reskilling. It's just continual learning. And when we change, I think that takes away some of that element of fear that comes with the notion of reskilling. Like, oh my gosh, I have to learn something new. What if I'm not good at it? Right? We're always learning something new. And at home, I've used this example before. When the dishwasher breaks, we Google it first. We look up a YouTube video to fix it before we have to call the repairman or buy a new machine. At work, something doesn't work, and we're like, oh, everybody has to stop. Like, I have to go take a boot camp for 40 hours and figure out how to do this. And so a lot of I was fortunate to be able to be involved in the prior administration's reskilling and redeploying efforts because I got to learn a lot about what we were really talking about. And we know the literature on this. It says 30% of 60% of jobs are highly automatable. It doesn't say 30% of jobs are completely automatable, and it doesn't say 60% of jobs will be replaced by technology. It says a lot of us are going to be impacted by it. So let's get ready for that. And what it does is it doesn't take 30% of our work away. It allows us to get to the 30% of the work that was above 100%. Right. And so this is as much a conversation about how we transform the culture of the workforce and what we expect from our employees to continually learn and grow and develop to continue to meet the mission, as it is about enabling that. Meaning, how do I start to automate that 30% so that people can get to the next 30% and learn something? And how do I give them a space to learn the new thing before they actually have to deploy it? So I'll give you a very specific example that I was talking to one of my leaders and mentors about recently. A couple of years ago, I was involved in rolling out a technology implementation, essentially application rationalization. How do we consolidate to a similar system across the department? And we had really great ideas about creating business process efficiencies and finding centers of excellence and getting to this really beautiful space that we all envision, right? And then we had the reality of time. So when you throw the reality of time in there, then you have to get to, all right, let's move to one system and then incrementally improve from there, which again is that cultural shift to how we make information technology changes. And we were able to do that really successfully. But if I play this forward and I say, I'm looking forward 10 years from now to what we're capable of when we have a fully data-enabled architecture that's cloud-based and accessible and open as appropriate, right, to people, then what I really envision is that we have an environment in the technical world, a virtual environment that is end-to-end reflective of our business process and IT solutions and the services we deliver to our constituents. If I have that and I know I want to make a change, then what I want to do is copy that environment real quick
Right.
to another one and try the change before I do it. Right. And we do that. And organizations like the Air Force have proven that you can do that to build fighter jets. Like, if they can do it, so can we. So imagining that future where we have this ability to create clones, or what the industry would call digital twins of our environment, where we can try these policy changes, or we can try these technology changes or business process changes, then I can imagine a different way of getting our workforce ready too. Because I think we've landed on this and this is what we want to do. We're going to implement these changes. I want you to try to deliver these services to these clones of our constituents in the virtual environment. And let's work out those kinks before you have to do it in real life. And it doesn't have to take a lot of time when you think about how long it takes to make a snapshot and copy something in today's digital world.
Right.
It's going to be even faster when we move forward. But in the past, we've had to send our people to boot camps and training so that they can understand the next version before they implement the next version and deploy the next version. And in the future, we'll be able to just have them log into another environment and try it real quick before they execute it. And that's what cloud and data approaches give us. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it gives you I think continuous learning. We kind of talked to it in evolving, right? You have to continue to evolve, right? The mere fact that you go to, again, this is cultural, is and kind of probably how people learn, is the mere fact that you started with Google. We Google, or we check YouTube for for a solution to solving our dishwasher problem. It happens in anything, right? Just doing a little research sometimes can give you a lot of information nowadays, because there is so much information available. And I think the key there is, kind of dialing back to the beginning of the discussion, right? Is these small little we'll talk to it in the different side, small little wins of, oh, well, that wasn't that hard. And I think that is a key. So I guess, but how do you, again, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, me, Chris Oglesby, as a guy trying to, got thrown in to learn writing stored procedures. I'd never written a stored procedure before, so I didn't get a boot camp. Basically asked the guy next to me, which was the version of a Google. But how do you get people to think that way, right? Because we're also kind of dealing with that insecurity of, well, if I ask a question, that means I don't know, and that goes back to kind of the start of the fail.
Yeah. First, we need to expect people to think that way. We need to be transparent about our expectations. So if we expect that our employees are spending time each day learning from others, or doing research, or being involved in professional associations that give them a broader lens into what's going on, then they'll do it because we expect it of them. If we expect them to remain competitive in and of their own responsibility, and they have to do that when they get home and they're trying to cook dinner and take the kids to baseball practice, then we can expect that they're not going to do much of that. Right? Because we all have lives. And so I think the first part of it is stating the expectation, and the second part of it is enabling it. So how do we encourage and enable that kind of looking to the future or learning from others as an element of doing your job today? Because this is not the industrial age where the way we operate factories or power factories is going to change. But don't worry, I have a couple decades. I can retire and the next generation will do that. We have a couple of days. Things change quickly. So we can't operate in the old workforce culture. We have to operate in today's workforce culture. And we can't just expect it and then not provide the mechanisms to do it, right? Because then not everybody will be able to take advantage of it. Some will. I was just hanging out with some neighbors recently, and we were talking about, how relatively cheap it is to just go take some of those major industry platform provided trainings on Python and R and data science and all this stuff now, and get yourself ready for a pretty good salary job. And wouldn't that be a smart investment that anybody could make? And I said, yeah, a smart investment that anybody could make if you had $2,000 that you thought was cheap relatively, and you had the time. And oh, by the way, you had access to internet where you were. Right. And so when you start to think about those downstream implications of who has the opportunity to exercise their ability to stay continually ready, or to stay a member of the workforce, then you realize that it's not all the same for everyone, right?
Right.
And so as leaders, we need to acknowledge that personally, a lot of what has driven my success is my ability to take advantage of learning and development opportunities on the job. So that it brought out the best of me in my day-to-day operations as well. And it just so happened allowing me to raise kids at the same time. And so it's just it's not the world of work my mother grew up in, right? It's different.
So I want to stop real quick and give Fred a quick plug here. He was putting out community of practice resources available to folks. As you know, we've talked about the DCCOI. The GSA Cloud Community Practice is also out there. There's plenty of resources for folks and organizations to access. So Fred, thanks for putting those out there, and just get back to this. So I want to kind of tie what you just said, right? So you talked about learning on the job, and I agree with you right now. It's interesting, right? Because the government is pushing and kind of play the government industry side of things here. And we've talked about this previously on the show, that there is an interest in the certifications, I'm certified in Python, I'm in Azure, I'm this. But then it gets back to your point earlier too of the understanding of the mission and the experience, right? So it's this balance, I think, of an organization to have these requirements, but to your point, if the organization isn't really allowing that, how do you kind of work through what you call this, this test and learn culture, if really there's still this kind of old school, again, I don't know if it's an acquisition play or if it's just an interest versus we need to do X. Please tell us what you're going to bring to do X, versus we need to do X with these requirements and these certifications. And so there's a contradiction that still exists, because I think industry is trying to bring experience and evolving with trying to succeed against that mission. Government organizations, I think, are still struggling with, well, no, but I kind of manage this box. But you have, you kind of touched on it, and I want to really kind of dig in as we kind of come to the tail end in this test and learn culture. How do you bring those two things together so they're not competing?
Well, it's certainly not easy.
Okay, well then, never mind. We'll just quit.
Right.
We'll end the show.
It's not part of why, as on the government side, I write statements of work and performance work statements and things like that. And we're constantly balancing the need to just get to the outcome and not have to state how it's done, with obtaining proof that the outcome can be achieved, right? Because all of that is a risk. And in today's environment, we have the ability to do more agile contracting. So the risk is a little bit smaller durations of time and smaller portions of work. But back when we started this, performance work statement firm fixed price stuff, and we just wanted the outcomes, we were engaging in 5 or 10 year contracts, right? That's a long time to assume the risk and figure out if the person coming to help you is really going to be capable of helping you. And so to that point, ways to evaluate ability to perform on the job, right, could naturally fall to education, experience certifications, things like that, because that's some sort of validator. When we move into the world of lots of dynamic change in doing work in smaller pieces, then I think we can be more comfortable taking advantage of an approach of demonstrated proficiency, meaning we can get to a space like the Air Force does, where they've cloned their environment and they allow the vendors to come in and fly before they buy. And instead of relying on certifications or years with the company or whatever it is, they can say, oh, I like that product you delivered.
Right.
And then now I want to take it. And so this is something that current technologies will allow us to get to this space where we can rely more on demonstrated ability than on paper certifications. But first, we have to have our data enabled in a way that we can dynamically practice that culture we hope to achieve. And so it is difficult. It's a little bit of the chicken and the egg thing, like which do you change? And it's from a government perspective, I would say it's uncomfortable for me sometimes, because we do have to take the risks and we don't know if the person on the other side is really going to be able to deliver. And that's part of our job as program managers in the government, to be able to adjust and flex and make changes as needed. Again, I think that as our environments shift, as our second industrial age or fourth industrial age or 12th industrial age comes along and changes the environment that we're working in and the technology we're working with, then our supporting mechanisms have to change as well. Our supporting mechanisms for acquisitions have to change. Our supporting mechanisms for training and developing our workforce have to change. And that's just going to be more and more rapid as we move forward. So I would expect that, just as some of the initiatives in the federal government to rely less on education and certifications and more on demonstrated proficiency and assessments of proficiency, that can filter out as well.
So, it's interesting because I think on the contracting side, we're starting to see these kind of smaller assessments, that are, again, kind of quicker return, right?
Yeah.
The acquisition process, though, sometimes is still longer than the than the term of what they're asking. And I don't know, just to kind of touch, we touch on this at times, and we had Terry Lee on from the Navy, and she talked about her use of OTAs, and kind of some successful, some not so much. That is something that I think has been shown some success on. Hey, let's do a little test, right, and go through this process, which has a little bit shorter, more defined kind of acquisition process. Do you have thoughts in kind of what, because you're obviously sitting in a lot of these conversations, and
yeah, I think that it takes time for these kinds of innovative ways of operating to take hold and to spread across a workforce this size. But I also think that there's an element of responsibility on people like me, on the program manager, project manager side, to understand what vehicles or avenues or options you have available, and to know to ask for them, right? So if we simply rely on how we've always done it, we're going to keep writing 5-year contracts and statements of work, and it's going to take a year to execute the acquisition, and then you're not really sure if you're going to get the budget, right? But if you know to go look for organizations that carry government-wide contracting vehicles or BPAs that you can execute a task order on really quickly for a small piece of work, then you're going to go ask for those and hunt those down. And so it's preparation and understanding of the tools available to you will net a faster outcome in the end, but we have to get used to doing that. And we have to get away from the culture of starting something brand new from scratch for ourselves, and instead leveraging what other people have already built, so that we can jumpstart or start from a different starting point, right?
Yeah, because I think
in a different place.
I think what can happen is, kind of to your point, right? You get stuck in these cycles of, well, here's what we're looking to do, right? But the acquisition time frame is coming quicker than you've kind of really put together a plan of what you wanted to do. So you kind of get stuck in okay, well, let's just do the same acquisition we did before, and then you buy another 5 years what you may not necessarily be heading towards where you want to go. So then that gets pushed, and you get kind of stuck in this this cycle. So one of the things that we talked about that with Brian Whitaker a couple weeks ago was that bringing the folks to the table, which I think you're kind of saying the same thing, right? We've got to, organizations have got to kind of come together and triangulate on goal, and then how do those puzzle pieces fit?
Yeah, and again, if these things were less complicated, we would have already figured them out. We have an appropriations process that incentivizes siloed systems thinking, that incentivizes multi-year contracts that we can fund and make sure that we can continue to deliver services. And we're all learning how to get comfortable with executing a one-year contract or a task order. And then during that 1 year, while you're executing on that thing that you had well-defined, defining the next piece and getting ready for that. And again, this is just working in smaller chunks. And as leaders, we need to be okay with working in smaller chunks. And we need to also give our resources the opportunity to work in smaller chunks by not expecting A pluses from everything. Right? This is just such a ripe, ongoing, fun conversation to continue to have and to troubleshoot together as we share information and innovate, not simply on the technologies we use, but on how we access and leverage those technologies and allow that to propel us into the future instead of just keep up with it.
Yeah, no, that's actually a very good point, which is again why we a lot of times use and I love the different use of terms is evolve, right? You have to evolve with it. You have to accept it and innovate. So I'm going to hit you with kind of the last question. You've come from kind of the IT management background. You hit kind of the CPIC, IT governance, and kind of that evolution into kind of the workforce. Do you see some of what, because this is obviously the big thing on the modernization funding that has kind of been documented? Do you see areas that helps bring those three pieces together? I mean, your experience is a nice trajectory of somebody that's been there, done that, trying to help others, go forward. So do you think there's opportunities with that funding?
Absolutely. I think that one of the capabilities that things like the Technology Modernization Fund afford us is that ability to make an investment now before we have the liquid funds available from efficiencies, because it takes time to get there. But I think there's a lot of opportunity in finding something to work on across business functions towards the same vision. So workforce is right in the sweet spot of that, right? We don't deliver mission without people. We don't deliver mission without data. We don't deliver mission without infrastructure. We don't deliver it without contracts. And so if we're thinking about how we continue to meet a mission in an ever-evolving world, then what we need to do is be able to understand and analyze and act on those interconnected pieces more quickly. And if we can create a space, an engine where the data is machine understandable and is able to be queried and is architected in a secure and private way, but is also able to be shared and accessed by all the federal government agencies, because the foundation of that information is jobs data, right? And mission data. Then I think that we can get to this space where we really need to bring together the functional areas of IT, data officers, human capital officers, learning officers, in a coordinated modernization effort that allows us to dynamically continue to deliver services to the American public. And it's not, that's like, oh my gosh, how are we ever going to do that? You have to start with one thing, right? So you take that big vision and you say, I want to try this in the space of federal job requirements and how that helps me understand my current workforce related to what I need them to do 2 years from now, because I've done a strategic workforce plan, and how I can source and recruit for a really diverse workforce to meet those needs 2 years from now. And so you have to take that big vision and say, I can try on this little piece, demonstrate value, ignite the spark, as some other mentors of mine have said, and let other people pick it up.
That's awesome closing. Thank you. And so thank you, everyone, as we come to a close here. Robyn, always enjoy chatting with you. And I think the fact that we have time bound helps us, because I think you and I can talk for hours on numerous
All
topics.
day.
So thank you again, Kirsten. Thank you very much. For those that have attended today, thank you. We're going to be taking a little bit of a break as we hit kind of summer vacations, and hopefully when we're back, Bill will be cleared, and really appreciate everybody's time today. And Robyn, I think Kirsten's going to want to take a quick snapshot, so thank you again.
All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you,
Thanks so
everybody.
much for
Robyn
having
really
me
enjoyed
today.
it.
Yeah.
Great.
All
Bye.
right. Bye.
Bye-bye.